Welcome to my talk, The Positive Impact of Shared Understanding on Your Organization. We already talked a little bit about on your organization. Yes, it is meant like this, that you take something out of that talk which you can probably apply in your organization as well. I will tell you a story, experience which I made in my organization, where I was working back in time. And I want to share some insights, what we did there. And today I will talk a little bit about causal loop diagrams, systems thinking, domain storytelling, translation hops, and knowledge gaps. So this will be part of my talk today. Are there any swimmers in the room? Raise your hand. You. Yeah, of course. So then I have to be careful what I'm telling now. An Olympic triathlon. And because I don't want it to be the only one who is doing breastswimming, I decided I have to learn crawl, right? It's not that difficult to swim and to do crawling, but it was. So my head almost exploded. What do I have to do with the arm, then the kick, then the breathing, and what else? And bring everything together. And that's not everything, because you have to think about your body position. Are you flat in the water? Because otherwise you have a lot of water resistance. How deep is the pool where you are swimming in? It affects the conditions. So it's actually a huge system, right? And everything affects each other. And we have to somehow think about those things, but don't do overthinking. I did the overthinking. I'm an engineer, I'm a developer. Of course I overthinked. Is my arm correctly pushed under the body and those things? And normally I had the best experience in swimming when I don't think about those things. So just let it flow, right? Feel for the water, whatever that means. And I noticed by myself very quickly I have a lack of mobility in my shoulder because I'm a developer. So yeah, it affects each other. And I thought for myself, what can I do about that? I can train a little bit, but more on that later. So it's important to understand why I have swimming in the context of systems and how this affects system thinking, or what you can achieve with system thinking or causal loop diagrams then to analyze that system of the mobility. Okay, who is this guy? I'm Benny. I'm mainly working as a developer. I'm still a developer. I'm working in a team as a developer, but only for 50%. The other 50% is a consultant job where I help bring business and IT people closer together with the help of speaking the same language. So those are my main jobs right now. And back in time, when the idea came for that talk, I was hired as a Scrum Master with strong technical focus, but also a little bit on organizational improvements. So that was my role back in time. And I was sitting in a meeting once. It was after a refinement session. We did our best. And there was a guy sitting in the same room, and he said, Benny, to the whole group, Benny, we have too much friction losses. And I was pretty stunned. Maybe I looked like this guy. What? We were in a refinement session. Everybody agreed that everybody understood what you are talking to us. It was the business responsible. And then he said, we have too much friction losses. I explain everything again and again and again. We write long lists of requirements, acceptance criteria, and so on and so forth. We have the epics, we have the stories which you always want. We have those backlog items and all those things in place. But we still don't get what we want. But why is that? Why is it? So I thought for myself what to do with friction losses. So in Germany it's Reibungsverluste. So what to do about friction losses? And that was the reason why I searched for friction losses. What is the definition of friction losses? Do you have an idea what a friction loss is? Where does friction loss happens? It happens, for example, when you are in production and you have energy which transforms into heat. So when you produce something, for example. But that's probably not what that guy meant, right? So it's not. You can have psychological friction losses when something is wrong in your social connection to other people's. But that's also not what he meant. And I thought a while for it, and I found a definition. So, in an economic and figurative context, frictional losses arise at interfaces of overall processes and procedures, but also when people work together, when goods, services, or information are not transferred optimally. And I was, yes, that's our definition. I will work with that one. Because it was our situation. We were talking to each other and we had the friction losses. And this is actually the definition which we used then. And what can be a possible result of this? We have a loss in efficiency, effectiveness, and finally there is a loss of information. And that was important, that was our start point to improve the situation. But how did the situation look before? So the as-is organizational structure before was like this. It was an in-house development where we developed software for those blue guys over there, the users. And we had that guy in the middle. How does it work? This one. This was the guy who mentioned we have too much friction losses. And the orange ones were helping hands of him. They helped him in requirements analysis, and this was the business department. So they were split in the business department, and on the other side we had a couple of other people, like IT managers, teams, and the IT department. And a lot of connections in between those people, right? So they were all talking somehow at some point to each other. And of course, you can imagine the guy in the middle, he has to do a lot of conversations. And whenever he explains something, he explains it 1, 2, 3 times, maybe to the development group 4 times, 5 times, and it can feel like we are losing the information. So this was more or less our as-is organizational structure back in time. And we not only had 8 developers, it were 4 to 5 teams with 7 or 8 developers, so it was a little bit bigger than on the picture, but I think you get the idea. To simplify it a little bit, you all know it, the Whisperers game, telephone game. So the one was talking to the one, the other one, to the next one, and finally, from a simple hello, we get, we don't know, but that's what the developers understood and what they put in code. That's their understanding what goes into production. And it's important that they understand what is coming into our system. So, and if you want to, you can put some roles there as well. User, domain expert, business analyst, requirements engineer, architect, development team. And with that, we started to think about our situation. And we said we want to use causal loop diagrams for that. Who knows what causal loop diagrams are? Quite a lot, but let's jump through it. Causal loop diagrams, we use causal loop diagrams to better recognize the dynamics of a system or an organization. I would say that's a good fit for us because we wanted to better understand the dynamics in the group, what is happening when, and for which reason, and what are the causalities. So we have a couple of things in the causal loop diagrams. We have variables, which can be increased or decreased. We have causal relations when variables are dependent on each other, opposing effects, when an increase or decrease causes the opposite effect for another variable, delays, a change of an aspect has a delayed effect, and finally loops, when variables are connected as a loop. Pretty simple. So normally when we apply causal loop diagrams, it's hard to do sometimes because you lose track, so it's not that easy. It sounds easy, but in my perspective, it's not that easy. So let's come back, or maybe let's do a physical activity together. I would like to invite you for a physical activity. Please stand up with me. Make yourself some space around, a little bit, it's better in the first row, of course. And just stretch a little bit. Put the arms, and then go down, and stop when it hurts. Good one, right? And memorize how deep you can go down. And now do it again. Stretch again, but now make yourself tall as possible. Go on your toes. Feels good, right? Maybe. Go down again. Oh, a little bit better, right? At least for me. And now put your fists together between your knees and press the knees together for 4 to 5 seconds. And from that position, go down again. Oh, I can touch the floor. Interesting, right? How is that possible? Oh, you can sit down again. Thank you very much. How is that possible? Just with a little bit of stretching, right? So the problem of our decreased flexibility is less than before. So those things are connected. The flexibility is connected with the stretching. And we can stretch ourselves out of the stretch reflex. That's a bad condition. Because if we don't have the stretch reflex anymore, our muscular communication doesn't work properly. That's important to understand. So we have a problem, decreased flexibility, and we want to solve that problem. And we work on the symptoms, our decreased flexibility. And we do that with stretching. And it helps, you have seen that, yeah? We have proven that. It helps a little bit. But it only helps for the moment, so it's a symptomatic fix. It's just for the moment. If you get up, again, you don't have to do it. It's probably gone. It's just there for a little while. This means we don't fix the root cause. Our root cause for the bad flexibility or for the decreased flexibility is bad muscular communication. It's in the biomechanics. And to do that, it takes longer. So we have a delay effect. It takes longer to fix the root cause. That's also important to understand. So what we have there are a couple of variables. They are connected. The O's are opposite effect. Stretch reflex is connected with an opposite effect over there. So the more we stretch, the less our stretch reflex is. The tendons don't work anymore, and the muscular communication is gone. And of course, those two pipes are a delayed effect. So that's how a system model can look like. Then we have some loops in there. So a balancing loop over there, reinforcing loop here, and another balancing over there. Why are they balancing loops? Because we have an unequal amount of O's. So we have a balancing loop, and if we have equal amount of O's, we have a reinforcing loop. Okay, how does it look like in practice? It looks like this. I have to blur it a little bit because it's out of the customer. So you can do that on a whiteboard, right? You can do that on sticky notes, and finally, again, a whiteboard. And we sketched around, we talked about the problem which we had in the organization. And we did that with the teams. we had a conversation about the problem, we had a conversation about the causal loop diagrams, and we just talked to get a better understanding. Be aware, all models are wrong, some are useful, right? And it depends on yourself what you put in your model and what not. It's your decision what you put in and what not. It's not other people's decision, it's your decision what you put in and what not. So this means, sorry, I don't know, I'm sweating around, sorry. So it's your decision what you put into the model and for which purpose you use it. But in the end, we model to have a conversation. That's the important part. We model to have a conversation. Let's now imagine we stand all together in a room and let's do that mentally journey together with me. And you know about the as-is structure or organization, you know about the problem, and let's put that into a systems model. So in the middle, we put not the friction losses, we put the knowledge gap. So we have a knowledge gap, and we know that. So when we have a knowledge gap, the likelihood of getting what you expect from a user perspective goes down. So it's the opposite effect. When we don't know what to build, the likelihood goes down. That's, yeah. So there is an error which goes down. Then on the other hand, there is the feeling that we have to do something about it because we want to build great software, a great product, right? So maybe there is the need for detailed analysis on the business side even. So they invest a lot of time in analyzing the requirements. So the worse the software gets, or the less the likelihood of getting what you expect is, the more you do analysis. And of course, this affects the knowledge gap. The knowledge gap goes down. At least it feels like. It's the stretching, right? We do the stretching there. It feels like we don't have that knowledge gap anymore. But that's not the full system, that's not the full truth. On the other hand, we have the code, and we learned from the Whisperers game that the domain quality in code is maybe not the best one. So if we have a knowledge gap, the domain quality in code goes down. And if the domain quality in code goes down, it takes even longer for developers to understand the domain. But they still do. Yeah.
The domain knowledge in code?
With domain knowledge in code or domain quality, I mean, which words do we use in our implementation? Do we use the wording out of the business? Or do we use the translated stuff which we understood? Yeah. Do we have a shared common language in the code and in our conversations? Or do we use same words for different things and so on and so forth? Yeah. So, and if we have code which was translated before, it's not easy for developers to understand, that business guy, about what is he talking now? We have named it differently in the code. It's something like that. But still, developers are learning about domain when they read the code. So again, we would close that gap, but it takes very long. So that's that delay effect when the code is not properly formed with business language. And finally, we also have a side effect over there because of the huge analysis effort. People tend to write down a lot. They even write down the solutions already in your backlog items. And they think, well, that's easy. The developer has just to implement it. Done, right? So it has an opposite effect on the learning because the developers just stick to the provided solution and they don't learn anymore. They don't learn about the domain by themselves. And that has a negative effect as well on the knowledge gap because the knowledge gap stays the same like before or gets even bigger because the business domain is evolving and changing and so on and so forth. So that was our situation. And I just named the upper balancing loop, having a better feeling and more knowledge in the business, but still missing the goal. The one below, not building what was expected with a bad domain model and not learning fast about the domain. And on the right side, it takes even longer to get what we expect and learning doesn't happen. So that was our system. And with that we said, okay, we want to work on the problem, on the symptom, the knowledge gap. We don't want to do the symptomatic solution anymore because that's the reason why we are in that situation. So we want to work on the fundamental solution, and ideally we get rid of the side effect. So that's what we agreed on. And to make things a little bit easier for us, I switched, you can see it here, or I splitted knowledge gap with translation hops out of the Whisperers game and the amount of information loss. So actually those are two different things. And we said we want to work on the translation hops, and domain knows a lot and provides a solution. We don't want to be in the situation anymore that the domain people are telling us what we have to implement and especially how. That was something which we wanted to change, and of course we want to get rid of those translation hops. I said it a couple of times now, so written backlog items are not a problem. They become a problem when they are not the result of team collaboration. So when we write them together and we have the real, true, same understanding, it's not a problem to have them written down, right? It's a problem when somebody somewhere writes down a requirement, puts it into backlog, and says, yeah, you have just to do it. That's simple, right? So written backlog items are not a problem. They become a problem when they are not the result of team collaboration. So what can we do about team collaboration? We decided to use a method which is called domain storytelling. Domain storytelling is a pictographic language and modeling technique from the field of collaborative modeling. There is also another one like event storming, also impact mapping, user story mapping. Those are all methods which you can use for collaborative modeling. And it's important, it's a collaborative modeling technique. So of course you can do domain storytelling by yourself, but then it's not collaborative, right? So it's a collaborative modeling technique. And you can do that in, for example, an overall refinement session, a team refinement session. It's all about understanding knowledge exchange, so it perfectly fits into refinement sessions. So domain storytelling consists of actors, work objects, and activities. It's not that much, it's simple. So domain stories are told from an actor's perspective. They have some work objects. Actors create, work with, and exchange work objects, such as documents, physical things, and digital objects. And they do something, they do activities, right? The actors' activities are the verbs of your domain. So let's do an example together, maybe on that little whiteboard. Who came to the conference per airplane? That's perfect. So you are the domain experts now for flying, okay? And let's imagine you want to book your flight to the conference. So what have you done in the first place? Just shout out. We will find the agreement how the domain story looks after. Check? Skies? So that's already a website, right? Yeah, let's maybe agree on doing the activity without IT. Just try to describe what you did and why you did it.
Search for a flight.
A flight, search for a flight, right? And you did it as actor, and you are You are a trainer, right? Less trainer. Is there a difference between the actor as a less trainer and a participant of the conference?
Yes, you have to possibilitate.
Interesting. So, on which do we want to agree? We book the flight as a less trainer, or we book the flight as a normal attendee? Normal attendee. Should we call that normal attendee, that actor? Conference participant. Can we agree on that? Okay. So now I'm bringing myself into trouble because the sticky is not that big. Conference participant. So we will have a look at the story of the conference participant. And you already said it. You search for flights, right? Flights. What are flights? A flight or more flights? Flight options? Oh, I don't want to put something into your mouth, so I'm just looking for options. Flight options. And because we are used to tables, I will make a table. I don't like Excel, by the way, but anyways. So the conference participant is looking for flight options. Is that correct? Is searching. What are you doing? Is it more searching? Searching activity? Finding? Searching? What should I use?
I mean, search doesn't complete, so I can search and just leave it open. But when I found, when I go to find something, I stop when I finished.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Something, I
Yeah.
can stop.
Yeah, and do it again and again. Yeah. But maybe one of the steps is searching, right? So let's search for it. So I just put it there, conference participant, search for flight options. That's our first sentence of our domain story. What can be the second one? Choosing a flight option. So one flight, right? One option. I like the option because it's something like that. And of course we need that name. Choose. No, not options, it's an option. Choose option. What's next?
Search for a hotel or a place to stay. I would pay book the flight, the option first.
You pay it.
I book.
You book it.
Story.
Yeah. What does booking mean then? Is there a difference between paying and booking?
No, paying and booking is the same thing, but no, it isn't. I book the flight for my case and send the invoice to my company.
That's interesting.
So
You okay? Let's make the invoice case. You send the invoice to your company.
Yeah, with my travel agency from the company.
Okay, that's great.
But does that change the actor? Because if a person is coming that's not through the company, they will have to pay. And it's not the company paying. So you have different ways of closing it.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. I just do it for the sake of simplicity. Send invoice to the company or whatever there is. Let's make somehow a company. So you see, you can have a lot of conversations about it. So that's just another actor, right? So the conference participant sends invoice to the company, and you gave already the reason for reimbursement or that they have to give you the money back and something like that. I think you get the idea of domain storytelling. You can do that pretty quickly. You can do that by your own. if you don't want to do it in the big group right from the beginning, you can say to yourself, okay, in the next refinement, I try to make a domain story, and you see, or you then see if you get the feeling, yeah, it makes sense, or there are missing parts in it. Normally when you start with something like that, there are missing parts, or what you also can do is just take your requirements out of the backlog, read through it, and make the domain story. And I bet you will have a lot of questions, especially about the situations. In which situations are you doing things? For which reason are you doing it? With whom together? What are the working objects? And so on and so forth. So this was our way to go. And of course, I also have that travel example with me. You can see there a little bit more of information. So it was done with a tool which is called Egon. You can find that on Egon.io. But we also have the traveler search flights on a booking system. So that's the first difference. I put it in the booking system because it's a digitalized story. So you have different kind of stories, coarse-grained, digitalized as is. You can have fine-grained stories as well. You normally have fine-grained stories when you are close to developing the stuff. So let's imagine we would now build a booking system, for example. Then when we are close to the sprint planning, you should have a fine-grained story in place. Maybe one which shows you the to-be situation, not the as-is situation anymore. So there is a difference in as-is and to-be, coarse-grained, fine-grained, and pure and digitalized. So this was more or less a pure one. And very often people tend to jump to digitalized stories because we are so used to IT systems that we don't understand the underlying domain anymore. And that was also the situation back in time in my organization. People said we need a JSON file. We need an adaptation on a parameter in the JSON file in line 299. Okay, for what reason? Maybe that's not the best solution, right? And sometimes you have to step back and ask, okay, what are we doing? What do we want to achieve in our domain? And if we go on like this, so we have also the payment there with the payment provider and those things. And assumption, economy class, only hand luggage. I just put a traveler, very generic. It's a little bit too generic because it makes a difference what we just learned. And finally, what can you do with those domain stories besides having a shared understanding about the domain? You can derive even code from it. You can have a flight entity, right? Which provides a method which is called chooses flight. Because that's our domain language. I would now expect that something like this can be found in the code. There are payment information objects. It's a value object maybe, which you can use in your code. And you can also use, based on the conversations, those special cases as titles for your scenarios, like when you do BDD or specification by example, you can use it for your key examples. You can say, okay, I want to dig deeper in a flight in the far future, a flight in the near future. What's the difference? Normally the price and the availability. You all know that thingy when you try to book a flight for tomorrow, there are only 3 seats left, something like that. So it's a difference. And you can use that as examples then and derive your acceptance tests out of it. So the purpose is not only getting a shared understanding, the purpose is also deriving code out of it and even the tests. So everybody has the same understanding about it and we can use the same wording for it. You can even go further and say, okay, if you want to, that's not what I wanted to. Doesn't look like it works. Okay, anyways. let's see why it's not working. You can say, for example, okay, this is our booking, and what else belongs to the booking? So the flights, the flight options, the flight, and the passenger details. And you can say this goes into one package in our Java code, for example. So you can even derive the package structure for your code. And then you have a business slicing rather than a technical slicing. And it helps you to adapt the code and to find code places if you have to do changes. Okay, also here a blurred example. So the lower right side was the result of a refinement session. So we just sketched the domain story, put that one on a Miro board, and put stickies on it with questions. So you see that thing is not understood. We have a lot of questions. We have to clarify those things before we start. And over there are just 2 questions left. So it was done on a paper like we did. And there are just 2 questions left, and maybe you can clarify them during the sprint. But that depends a little bit. Okay, so that's a good situation. So we have a shared domain understanding, right? So everybody in the room who participates in that refinement session, domain expert, business analyst, I mean, I don't say you have those roles, but everybody in the room can agree and has a shared domain understanding. Even the code can agree. So the code reflects what is happening in your domain. And that's quite a good situation. This leads us to a picture from Jeff Patton, who has written the user story mapping book. It's not like on the top left side anymore. I'm glad we all agree and everybody has something different in his mind. It's like on the lower right side. We really have the same understanding about what we have to do. So we have the same mental models. And because that is also a collaboration technique, a modeling technique, you know, all models are wrong and so on and so forth, but some are helpful, and this is really helpful, and we can all agree. So if this is the case, how does it affect, or what does it change in our system now? So that was the old one. And we worked on the translation hops, and as you can see, I changed the side effect. Domain knows a lot and provides a solution to percentage of shared understanding. So that's actually a great situation, right? So translation hops go down, amount of information loss goes down. Perfect. Amount of information loss goes down, likelihood of getting what users expect goes up. The need for the detailed analysis in a domain is not there anymore. This leads to the side effect that we have a higher percentage of shared understanding because we are doing those requirement analysis thingies together, not alone anymore. There are not long lists of written words anymore which we have to translate or interpret. And on the other hand, the domain quality in code probably goes up. That's what I meant with domain quality. Use those words from your domain and you have a high domain quality. Now it should be clear. Yeah. And we don't have the delay effect anymore. Even if you have new joiners as developers in the team, they can just read through the code and understand what's happening in my domain. Therefore, we have a couple of reinforcing loops now, and I named the first one hitting the goal based on shared understanding. So it's all about that context and shared understanding. It's so important. Having a model in the code which reflects the business and speaking one language. So that's really the important stuff. The title is On Your Organization, the positive impact of shared understanding on your organization. So let's have a look at the old organizational structure. It was like this. But because we get closer together, it can look like this. You see the difference, right? That guy from the business, and it actually was like this, moved to the development team. Not formally, That was a different story. Formally, it was not easy. But he participated in the sprint plannings, in the dailies, in the refinement sessions, in the retrospectives. Whenever the team did something together, he participated. And of course, that reduced those connection errors, and we can get rid of the telephone game. Okay, so this was our new organizational structure, and I put some question marks to the business and IT. Is it important to talk about business and IT? I don't think so. And especially in this situation, not anymore. Because from the outside, you wouldn't see a difference between business and IT. And that's, for me personally, a great goal if you can achieve something like that, because then you can have a lot of fun together. And it's not like before that we have to work under pressure and doing those things. So the solution comes from partnership rather than finger pointing, right? Actually, it was good for me that that guy said, hey, we have too much friction losses, because then we thought about that situation. But then the solution was the real close collaboration, and that everybody in the organization allowed to change those things, that guy helps us in the team and is more like a team member than anything else. So we have to find ways to understand the situation. We did this with the causal loop diagrams, and we said we want to work on those things. And we got the support to work on those things. That's also important. Okay, finally, some positive impacts. You get more business value. You can imagine if the internal users get what they want and they can do their job better, that has a positive impact or positive effect on the business. So more business value. We have less waste, of course, because when everybody understands what we have to do, we have to do less rework. No rework anymore. And as I showed you, it gives us the possibility to do those acceptance test-driven development thingy, which helps us in the long run to change things because we have a safety net for it. And finally, of course, that domain understanding helped us to build a suitable solution for everybody. How can you start? I already said it. You can use domain storytelling whenever you want. You don't have to do a full change with your team. You can just scrabble around in the next refinement session and see what is your understanding of the domain, and then maybe go to a business person, go to a developer, and discuss with him, is this the same understanding what you have? That's a possibility. You can use it for sprint planning 2, for example, and derive your solution out of it, as we have seen, like how does the code looks like, or you do a speculative design with the help of it to discuss in a bigger group, how do we want to solve it. And of course, in the retrospective, I mean, we had the open space conversation before with Robert about retrospectives. We can use causal loop diagrams in a retrospective. Yeah. I would say we can use it on team level and on organizational level. That's just fine. And you probably have to do if you want to change things when you are organized like business and IT, and you probably have to do it in an overall retrospective. With that, thank you very much. If you want to learn more about it, there are some learning resources, some books which are really helpful, especially when you want to read more about those topics which I explained. And yeah, thank you very much. If you want to discuss further things or ask questions, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. And yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to have conversations about those topics. I love this topic. And yeah, therefore feel free to contact me. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm not sure if there is some time left, or if you have questions right now.
So finding the language or kind of the compromise between the language from the business and the developers, what was the effort here and how did you manage to bridge both worlds together?
So if we talk about the whole process, which I demonstrated, it took us 2 years. So it's not that fast. If you start with domain storytelling, you're pretty fast in speaking the domain language. But if you want to change the structure that you have the business people joining the IT department, it took us 2 years. So yeah, it's a long time, I would say, but it was totally worth it. And yeah. If there are no other questions, great. Thanks again.
Thanks.